Welcome to Even Tacos Fall Apart, where we talk about navigating the ups and downs of life with a focus on mental health. I'm MommaFoxFire, and today we're diving into something that doesn't get talked about enough. Why some people can access mental health care easily, while others can't get through the door at all. We live in a world where everyone says mental health matters. You see it plastered all over social media, companies put it in their mission statements, politicians mention it in speeches, but when you actually try to get help, you run into walls, and those walls are a lot higher for some people than they are for others. If you live in a rural area, you might not have a single therapist within an hour's drive. If you are low income, your insurance might technically cover therapy, but good luck finding someone who actually takes it. If you're part of a marginalized community, you might finally find a therapist only to realize they have zero understanding of your cultural background or lived experience. I've seen this play out in my own life. I'm in Texas. I have a trans son. Finding competent, affirming care for him was hard. Needing to find it today would be nearly impossible. And we have resources. We have insurance. We have the ability to drive to appointments even when they're far. Imagine if we didn't have those things. Where would we be? The reality is that mental health care in this country, the US, is set up in a way that works best for people who already have advantages. If you are cis, het, white, if you have money, if you live in a city, if you have good insurance, if you can take time off work, if you have transportation, then yeah, the system might work for you. But strip away any one of those things and suddenly you're fighting an uphill battle just to get basic support. And it goes beyond just being about access. It's about quality. You can finally get into a therapist's office and realize they're giving you advice that doesn't work for your life. Maybe they don't understand your family structure. Maybe they don't get the economic pressure you're under. Maybe they are viewing everything through one cultural lens and your experience doesn't fit into that mold. I had a terrible first therapist. She wasn't a bad person. She just wasn't right for me. And because I didn't know any better, I thought that's what therapy was. I thought it was supposed to feel uncomfortable and unhelpful. It took me years to try again. And when I finally did, I found someone who actually got it. Someone who understood where I was coming from. The difference was night and day. But I had the privilege of trying again. A lot of people don't. They have one bad experience, or they can't find anyone who takes their insurance, or they can't get time off work for appointments, and that's it. They're done. The system failed them, and they're left to figure it out on their own. Today, I'm talking with Gino Titus-Luciano. He's a licensed mental health counselor who runs a practice across Hawaii, Nevada, and South Carolina. He teaches future therapists at Northwestern. He's president of the Hawaii Counselors Association, and he spends a lot of his time fighting to make mental health care actually accessible to the communities that need it most. We are going to talk about what those barriers really look like, not in an abstract policy language type of way, but in real terms. What happens when you live on an island without reliable internet and your only option for therapy is video chat? What happens when the reimbursement rates for Medicaid are so low that therapists can't afford to take on those clients? What happens when the entire foundation of modern therapy comes from one narrow perspective? Gino understands because he has lived this. He's had to examine his own internalized doubt about whether he deserved to be in his graduate program. He's had to learn what works in a textbook doesn't always work in real life. He's had inmates tell him that his anger management advice would get them hurt in prison. He's seen firsthand how systems can either support healing or stand in the way. This conversation is for anyone who's tried to get help and couldn't. For anyone who's felt like therapy wasn't made for them. For anyone who knows someone struggling to access care. And for anyone who wants to understand why we need to do better. Mental health care should be available to everyone, not just people who can afford it or who live in the right zip code. Everyone. We're not there yet, but people like Gino are doing the work to get us closer. So let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Gino about mental health care for marginalized groups. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Mental Health Monday here on Even Tacos Fall Apart. I am really excited for this conversation. As always, I'm MommaFoxFire, and today I am joined by Gino Titus-Luciano, who is a licensed mental health counselor, educator, and leader who's deeply committed to making mental health care more accessible, especially for communities that are often overlooked, which is something that we're going to talk about today. But Gino, thank you so much for agreeing to join us today, and welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me and for giving me a chance to, share your platform and talk with you and share some insights about myself, my career, and what it is that I do.
Absolutely. So let me tell you guys a little bit about what Gino does. Gino is the founder and CEO of Mental Health and Wellness Group, which provides culturally responsive therapies across Hawaii, Nevada, and South Carolina. He also teaches in Northwestern University's counseling program, helping train the next generation of mental health professionals. As president of the Hawaii Counselors Association, he is working with lawmakers to improve access to care and strengthen the counseling field statewide. His career has spanned work with youth justice, correctional reform, and family therapy, so he brings a real world understanding of how systems and communities can either support healing or stand in its way. I'm really looking forward to talking with him about what it takes to expand access to quality mental health care for marginalized groups and what real advocacy looks like in practice. If y'all are wanting to connect with Gino, I'm going to post right now his website, Instagram, and LinkedIn, all places you can find him and his team. And feel free to pop over there, like a couple of his posts, give him a follow, leave a comment. All of those things are what helps. But Gino, what first inspired you to get into mental health work, and how did that evolve into what you do now with advocacy for marginalized groups?
Absolutely. You know, my journey in mental health kind of started out in what felt like kind of floating through the ether as I first started college. I really didn't know what I wanted to do, and I took a psychology course with this professor. And she really brought it to life, and it was such a fun subject that I was like, "All right, well, I really don't know what I'm doing. I'm gonna take another one of her classes because she's so fun, and at least I'm gonna enjoy the class." And the more I learned, the more I wanted to learn, and I think that was the first time I really felt this drive to, not I don't want to say care about my education because I did, but it really felt like there was something that was meaningful to me. And from there, it really progressed into understanding myself, how I saw the world, the community, and, with psychology looking more at a micro lens, I also had an opportunity to take some greater looks through other courses with sociology about how, greater systems moved. And one of the things that really intrigued me was systems-based work. So the communities and the psychology behind that. And that really started to drive my work forward. After undergrad, I worked in the mental health setting, in a behavioral health arena, which was supporting primarily autism. And so when I went back to become a clinician, I decided to go towards counseling. And when I went with Northwestern, that's what really kind of really solidified to me that I wanted to work in an area of diversity, inclusion, marginalized communities. I saw how much of a need there was, not just in my own backyard, but in the greater continental US. And it was really eye opening. And I think that it really started with, a reflection of myself. I was talking with a friend of mine, about going into the program and over at Northwestern, where I did my graduate training. And I joked and I said, I'm probably just a DEI, student. And you I was making a joke and they stopped me and they said, "Why do you think you said that?" And I was like, "Oh, I was just making a joke." And I really didn't put much thought into that. And they're like, "Do you believe that though? Do you believe that you don't deserve to be there other than for the fact that you're bringing in, a number?" And I'm like, "No, I don't think that. I feel like I earned it." And he's like, "Maybe you should say that then. Maybe you should not joke about that because sometimes in our jokes, we're really saying things that are really part of our insecurities." And that really kind of just stuck with me. And I was like, whoa, maybe in there, I had recognized I had a fear of saying I was equitable. I could be a part of that system, that I earned my place in that university, in the institution. And from there, I just recognized how these micro influences around our community and our lives really shape how we identify ourselves, how we behave, and how we see others. it all really kind of coalesced for me. And that was just kind of a big part of not just my journey in the mental health, but why working with marginalized communities and advocacy became so important.
Yeah, the words you say matter more than sometimes you even realize whenever you're saying them. It's really, really impactful. And that's just another opportunity to reframe, you know, everything that you're thinking inside of yourself and all of that. I love that it started with just this teacher that you were like, I enjoyed the class and I went back for another class. My oldest is in college to become a teacher. And one of the reasons he wants to be a teacher is he says like, imagine, because we've been through, I mentioned to you, I'm in Texas. It's not a great place. My
Mhm.
oldest son is trans, and it's definitely not a great place for that. And he's like, we've been through all of the like, okay, you're not going to make a lot of money. It's a thankless job. There's a lot of demands. You're working with kids and all this stuff. And he always just goes back to think about what a difference a teacher like me could have made to a student like me. And it's like, that's it right there. Teachers have the chance to make such a
Absolutely.
huge impact. And it sounds like they did for you. It's still a thankless job, I think.
Oh no, fully, fully. Absolutely. There are so many teachers along the way. Growing up, I was not the best student, and but there's some teachers that stood out to me that really just, as much as I appreciated them as I really moved forward in life, I was so thankful for my experience with them and what they really did in regards to not just encouraging me as a student, but as a person. And there are some teachers out there really that just make your day, make your life, make your
Yeah.
experience in school more than just, being a teacher student dynamic. So I was really appreciative of that. So that's really great. And I'm sure he's going to really affect, the lives of people in such a positive way that he will end up teaching.
Yeah, it really is it's one of those things that you look back on your life and you're like, "Oh, I had many favorite teachers," or maybe you just have one favorite teacher or whatever. You remember them. I'm 40 years old. I remember teachers from 3rd grade. I remember a teacher from 2nd grade. Like I remember all of these people going way back into my life and it's like that's a huge impact in creating and shaping things as they are. And just little humans. You're just shaping little humans. I love that.
Yeah.
But it's really cool. You just kind of went back for another class and you were inspired and and your attitude about it sounds really neat. Just well, at least I know I'll enjoy the class. That's
Yeah.
something that I think students should embrace more in college and be like, oh, I know I'll enjoy this class. I might not necessarily enjoy the subject matter, but the class is going to be good. So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
So now you're on this side of it. What do you love about being a therapist and an educator yourself and this organizational leader? And also, what are the biggest challenges or is there anything you hate about it?
That's such it's really interesting being on this side of the fence. And I reflect on it. I just finished a convention, our Hawaii Behavioral Health Convention, which was a group effort between all of the licensing bodies in the state of Hawaii. So I also serve as the president of the Hawaii Counselors Association, which is the Hawaii chapter of the American Counseling Association. And we had a chance to really reflect on us as professionals. It was a place for us to do continuing education. So, really to do a lot of learning. And one of the things that came up really was what it means to be on this side and to see things as a therapist and how not just my work impacted as a professional, but how the other people in our community who are training to be mental health counselors, who are training to be marriage and family therapists, social workers, psychologists, it really is nice to have this global look and understanding. On this side, I do love to be able to work directly with someone and see change, to hear it, to see it, to know it. And I talk with people often and I get the feedback that they feel that therapy has been a direct link to some of the changes that they've made in life. And what I really love about that is that changes that they made, meaning that it wasn't something that they recognize as it wasn't just going to therapy that changed them. It was a choice that they made and helping them understand how impactful our choices can be. And so for the micro level, I love that. I love seeing that I can create effect and that gives me joy to know that the work that I'm doing is meaningful. And as an educator, I think that it is also wonderful to know that I feel like I'm giving back to the profession, but also via the community through that. When I pour into the students that I've worked with, my hopes is that they will take that and in turn use that to impact changes in their community with the clients that they work with. And I do love that. As an organizational leader, I think that it is really I've had the chance to be under the tutelage of some amazing leaders myself and to want to model what they have shown me is this is a great way to lead. I think that I also, in life remember supervisors, managers, leaders that, you know, I was like, I don't know if that's really how I want to do it. And so trying to learn and the hope though is I try to lean more on the positive side is I know how impactful it was to have a good leader, someone that I looked up to and said, yes, that's someone I want to be like. To be able to do that, my hope is that it will inspire others who are learning under me, who are working with me to take that, to run with it, to build on it, to grow, and just continuously, every succession better than the next.
I like that. Are there any huge challenges that you come across
You,
or
kn-
any
you know,
negatives?
there are some things I know that I could say that I hate about it. It is really different being on this side as a therapist. I cut my teeth primarily in the social service arena. For those in the mental health field, there's a lot of case management component that goes with that. And what that really can mean is that you have a multifunctional involvement in a client's life where you can support them in a very it's almost abstract because you get a lot more room to be supportive of them, uh, and there's some pros and cons to it. But on the therapeutic side, you understand where your limit is. And that is by design because you're there just for counsel, not to do for, because it would change the dynamic of what it means to be involved with that client. And there are absolutely times where, I'm like, man, if I could, I would want to intervene to help this person or that person. But recognizing where that boundary is and maintaining that professionally for them is important and significant. And I also will say that there are times in which bureaucratically there's just red tape that happens on an organizational level that I see that I'm like, man, this could be so much more smooth. There are things that really we're doing it the hard way. We've been doing it the hard way. And I think that really comes down to just hopefully making changes to the systems. And if I do get a chance to share with some of the changes that we've made in Hawaii that have come down, I'll put a pin in that, but circle back to it. But it really kind of speaks to some of the red tape I was talking about.
Yeah, that's one of the main, whenever I ask this question, especially of folks who are therapists or in the mental health space in that way, that's one of the things that just comes back. The red tape and insurance. Those are probably the two biggest answers that I wind up getting. I hate dealing with insurance. I hate dealing with red tape. Now, the other one that you said, the part of like, sometimes I wish I could just reach out and do something about it for someone. That's one we've gotten that before, but it's definitely one that would be really hard for me. That would be really hard for me to be like, because my therapist, she was so patient with me, especially whenever I was going through some of the worst things. She was super patient with me. And then finally, whenever I would come to a realization, she'd be like, oh my God, finally. And I know, like, you get to that point and you're like, how long have you been waiting? How long have you been waiting on me to figure this shit out for myself? Sometimes it's a long time.
It can be. And I think that, you know, when you are looking at the picture and you're standing back and looking at it in totality in therapy, I think that therapists get a chance to do that. It seems a little bit more clear. And a lot of things I think are easier in theory than practice. And so I
Yeah.
think with therapists, we theoretically can help to conceptualize a direction in which something might be better for shift or change, but also recognizing that it's not easy to make that change. The things that we're saying and counseling and advising on is really it's hard work. It's hard work to make life changes, to commit to that, to do that. And I imagine every therapist really knows that and is empathetic with their clients, and that patience is absolutely needed because you know, it would be so wonderful if we could just say, hey, do this, this, and this, everything's fine. Fortunately, it doesn't really work that way. Maybe for a few, but for myself and for I know a lot of other people, recognizing that a lot of people need some grace and patience.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep. Absolutely. I know I did. Oh, Bite Mark sent this question ahead of time. She said she couldn't be here tonight, but she would like to know, what is your favorite poem?
Such a great question. Without question, Invictus is my favorite poem, William Henley. It is, I have the quote or the poem on my wall in my home office. And I know that there were times where I felt like I struggled so much through school and through other things that were just a challenge. There was something about that poem that was really inspiring to me, just really about not giving up and moving forward. And, there's so much to take away from that. And it just really was meaningful to me. And I think that it was just something that I looked at and still look at time to time when I feel like I need some encouragement and to really give myself kind of that push where I can stop, reflect. And yeah, so that is by far my favorite poem.
Yeah, the last 2 lines of that one are super memorable. So if you're like, "Oh, that sounds familiar," the last 2 lines are, "I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul." And if that is like, "Oh, yeah, okay, I know that." It's from that
Yeah.
poem, and it's a short poem. I encourage you to go and just read it real quick. I posted a link in the chat if you're interested, but yeah, it's a great one. It's a great one. Super inspirational, most definitely. What are some of the biggest barriers you see in marginalized communities and the things that they're facing, especially when it comes to accessing mental health care?
Yeah. Yeah. This is such a, an on point question. Last this past so earlier this year was this past legislative session. We had went to talk about a telehealth bill in Hawaii, and that is that there's audio only telehealth right now that was and it's I'm gonna give the good news first. It passed, thankfully, meaning that people have the option of doing audio only telehealth. And that kind of seems like a small thing, if you don't really think about it too much. But in a lot of remote places, internet is not accessible. People can't travel. And one of the things that they do have are phones. And this can be also people who are older, who,
Right.
maybe have disabilities. So for us, we wanted to really push for this to keep it in. So during COVID, there was a lot of changes and telehealth really boomed. Telehealth was just, it went from a theory. It's kind of funny because I want to say maybe about 3 years before telehealth, I was in Palo Alto and I was at a university up there and I was talking to this professor who was sharing about telehealth and how it was impacting in Central America. He was talking about how they put a village, they put a computer there and made it accessible for someone remotely to talk to people, and how he hopes that this would be the way of the future. And I was like, wow, that's wonderful. I mean, I can't imagine insurance companies are really going to go for that, but maybe one day. And then a couple years later, he was on the money. He nailed it. He called it out, and it really did work. But as COVID, started, the laws and things around them, they were temporary and they started to sunset and change. This became something that was on the table. And it was really, to me, not confusing and somewhat surprising, but there is an abundance of need for that, and there are other things like this where care is not as accessible, whether it is a physical accessibility or these accommodations where you have to fight for them. And so I think that, to me, the biggest challenge is that it is people in a position to make changes that don't always recognize how much power that they have and are needed. And so we needed the voices of providers. We needed people in the community to say, hey, this is why it's important. My clients rely on this. So it is this need of these marginalized communities. Some of the biggest barriers that we see there is just that policies and things are not in place to be fully supportive. And so it takes not just people lobbying, but it's the community that comes together and really can influence it. And I really reference this because it was a really clear change that we have made in order to provide this type of accessibility. In Hawaii, there are a lot of places. So Oahu is our main island. It's a gathering island where everyone's here. Um, and we see a strong, dense population, which means that there are a lot of providers here. The other islands are more sparse. They're a little bit more rural. And
Mhm.
so with that, they don't have the same access to tech. Internet isn't as great over there. And so this is it would have been to me very hazardous and fortunate and just all the negative if it had fallen apart. So I'm very grateful that it went forward and those that championed it, and was with me and the group that was lobbying for that. So I would say, sorry, a long-winded way of saying that the biggest barriers, I think, really are policy.
It's really interesting how much COVID just changed things overnight, and obviously for the negative, but then also in some ways for the positive, because it was one of those things where insurance wasn't covering going to therapy virtually. They weren't covering seeing your doctor virtually. It was like some doctors offered it, had to pay for it out of pocket. And then all of a sudden, it was like, please don't come to the office, to the doctor's office if you think you have COVID. Hold up your little COVID strip and show that it's positive, and we're just going to call in a script for you. And it was like, hey, we're going to do a therapy session. We're just going to do it on the webcam or whatever. And I know for a lot of folks that was huge, because if you're stuck at home with your kids because they're no longer in school, it's really difficult to get away and go to a therapy session. So you're just going to cancel. It's just the reality of life is, if it's too
Yeah.
hard, you're not going to do it. Or sometimes if it's even a little bit hard, then you're not going to do it. Like, you throw up any sort of barrier and it's
Yeah.
just not going to happen. And it's totally understandable in a lot of ways for folks who are facing things like poverty, or things like you're talking about how far things are from one another. And it's really difficult sometimes to realize that those things continued after COVID. Like, those challenges still exist in a lot of ways after COVID. And there is some pushback on things like health insurance not covering some things anymore. And it's really, to me, been a kind of a negative trend that I've noticed a little bit of, well, things need to go back to normal. And it's like, can we just help make that normal? Can we just make that a little more normal? I think it would be better. It was better then, and it's still better now if we can continue it. Those of
Well,
you who are here in the chat, Rose, I see you. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat, and we'll make sure to get them answered while we're here together today. So, how do systemic issues like poverty, like geography, and even things like racism, how do those play into who has access to care and who doesn't?
that is such an important conversation to have. And it is really, when we look at social psychology and the way that we see just systems, is something that interplays with sociology as well. Just we look at the way that the natural structuring of money flowing into a community works and we see that in SES, so socioeconomic status, really can affect what is abundant for people and what isn't. And so it makes sense that in areas that are better funded, that there are going to be more access to care, more offices, more places. So for example, if you look at a lot of, community centers that are supporting low income populations, you will see these places. And these are places that tend to have a lot of students, and they're great training grounds. But that is a difference between the type of care that you're going to get. If you are not able to afford certain quality care, you would likely need to have a higher paying insurance. So Medicaid for a lot of people is, and it looks different from each state what they call it, but essentially the state's Medicaid, in Hawaii we call it Quest, that will get you to some type of care, but there are a lot of people who don't accept it because there is a low reimbursement rate on that. Certain providers think, I'm not gonna spend my time with a client that way, because although I want to do the work there, the cost benefit isn't there. And so for them, that's their own kind of financial balance that they need to do. And so we do see that with certain type of insurance plans, with certain things like that, there's this kind of natural barrier to people getting the same type of care from the same quality of clinicians. Now, I'm not trying to say that students or trainees are not, or people in the training process are not of quality, but it does look different from a licensed professional. And there are people who absolutely need that within communities that are underserved. And so there are ways in which a lot of states try to support these communities by getting them care, but it really shows you that poverty can be really impactful of really what is available to you. Racism is something that is just a part of a system that we're indoctrinated into it. And something that I do think is also important to think about too is about the way that we even orient from our therapeutic work. And this is why I think it's really important to be culturally responsive. And that is that a lot of the things that inform modern therapy really, hails from a white male perspective. If we think about who we call the fathers or founders of psychology, a lot of them are white men. And it is not that we want to say that nothing that they, have contributed is of value. It is important and it has laid a great foundation. But I do think that it really is something that should evolve as time and people and the world evolves. And I think that that is something that is absolutely in there in regards to either providers or just the way that we see some of the work going, some of the studies going.
I really, I really, I think that it's difficult to kind of put it into perspective if you're a white man and you hear everything saying like, because I have a son who is super white. He's out there in the living room building robots right now, but he's super white, and I know that he hears all these things. It's like we can't, everything comes back to white men, and they're all the ones that get all the credit and everything. And it's hard whenever you hear that kind of thing as a young white man also, to then put that into perspective of, well, we just need to make sure that, you're not giving one person the credit and that kind of thing. And it's like, all right, we're not trying to take the credit away, right? We're not trying to say, oh, well, white men can't do anything or they shouldn't do anything or they shouldn't get the credit. But there's so many people out there who are doing the same work or better work and not getting that recognition. And I think that that's really important. And I know he understands that in particular because I've drilled that into him quite frequently, that a lot of the time, whenever you're looking back in history, those people's work wouldn't have been able to be done if not for the labor of other marginalized categories of people. So getting it into that perspective, and then, it is really just that it's part of the system now. And it's hard to get around that system. And I hope that one day we're able to look back and be like, yeah, we did a great job handling that. But so far, we haven't.
No, absolutely. And I just want to say to that, I think there are a lot of people that I work with who feel, who are white men. And I think that they look at this and they say, everyone tells me that I'm supposed to have this privilege, but I don't see it. I don't feel it. Where is it? I think that it's really hard because, again, we orient only from our perspective. And it can be really challenging, and I think that to me, this is just a great opportunity to open up this need for empathy through experience, and that really, I think, helps to change it. Because just because you are a white man, it doesn't white men don't have the world handed to them in the sense, that they're not just all immediately affluent, but it really is recognizing it really more in the context of opportunity. And I think that as we experience more of each other, it helps to really bridge some of these gaps and create understanding, and from that, creating change.
Yeah.
I think that's really, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a great I'll have to look up the study. There's a great study that it was done in a college setting, in a lecture setting where there was interaction between the students and the professor, and it was all about the perception of how much did, and I'll just use women, if this one was on women versus men. So how much did the women talk versus how much did the men talk? And when women talked more than like 25% of the time, everyone said that women took up most of the conversation. When it was men talking even like 80% of the time, everyone said it was pretty equal. And so it's just like the voice is being heard. Sometimes that perception is that they're trying to be louder. I think they should be even louder and everyone else should suck it, but that's me. So we do have one question in the chat. It's not super related, but I'll go ahead and read it out, and we can just like touch on it and then move on. But opinion on
Sure.
gauging ears. So this is by Rose, and I'll say my little sister has gauged ears and she absolutely loves it. I do not have gauged ears. I have pierced ears and I absolutely love mine. And then like there are people with no piercings and they love theirs. So my opinion is if it makes you happy, then go for it.
Yeah. So just a kind of a quick thing on body modification, really, because I think that kind of falls into that category, but also body art. There, there are a lot of people who I think have opinions on our bodies and what we do with ourselves, from tattoos to piercings. And I think that we really look at, the way that we express ourselves really should, what I hope is something that comes from ourselves. And there are a lot of things in the world that show us that we have accepted some levels of changes to our physical appearance as being acceptable. Like there are certain types of braces that are really just cosmetic. And that is like not, it isn't medically necessary, but people want that because they want a straighter smile. They want to look at a certain way, but that's modifying your body. But there are certain things that we see as, okay, you can put some hair on your head if you, do a hair transplant, these other things, because we put a premium on that. But again, modifying our body. And so I think that it's important to really just give ourselves the room to say, if this makes me happy, it is my expression, it's myself. And there are other people out there who may be uncomfortable with you expressing yourself. But I think that really just comes back to just really centering around your happiness. And if you like it, that speaks to you, go for it.
And I think that there's probably no harm to other people engaging your ears, but as far as body modifications go, also, I'll just throw in there because this is something that I've told my oldest now that he is actually an adult. As long as it makes you happy and it doesn't harm anyone else. If you're going and getting
There
certain
we go.
symbols tattooed on your body and that's going to be visible, not that he ever would, but those can be really harmful. And just be aware that some things are actually harmful, even if you are putting them on your body. So there, just throw that in there
Yes.
too.
Great qualifier. No, that's fair. Very important.
So we've talked about policy so far quite a bit. How do you keep advocacy grounded in real experiences of clients and communities instead of just policy language?
Yeah, yeah. I think that that to me really goes down to, again, kind of taking things out of the macro and the meso as you get more into the micro, and really about what you do with yourself and your community and your learning. So this really to me goes down to personal learning, training, continuing your own education, and how you are sharpening your own skills and keeping them sharp. And so when it comes to my direct work with clients, I always want to make sure that I prioritize the learning that I do around the demographics I'm seeing and ones, even people that I haven't, because my hopes are one day to just be full of knowledge that hopefully one day that I either can share with a client, share with someone else, or, to continue to bring that to the table. And I think that to keep things grounded, oftentimes, really to me, is practicing it. And when I do feel that I have an opportunity to practice it, where it's not just the learning, but the application. And in the application of keeping things grounded with clients, it is also hearing and understanding things from the perspective of a client and recognizing when my perception may need to grow or change, and that there are times in which what we say or want to give or prescribe to a client is not always, it doesn't just work because the textbook says it does. And I have a quick story about that that really was a learning opportunity when I was doing my internship. So I did my internship in the mid and max security prison, and I was teaching an anger and stress management class to inmates in prison, these gentlemen that were incarcerated. And as I was talking about using your words essentially and not being, not using violence, but really about communicating our feelings. And I noticed that one of the classmates he was snickering a little bit and kind of shaking his head. He wasn't trying to make a scene and it wasn't causing, attention to the class. But when it ended, I pulled him aside before he got in line and I said, "Hey, I noticed you were maybe amused with what I was sharing. I know this might sound a little silly. Maybe it sounds too fluffy." And he was really nice. Said, "No, no, no. It's not that." He said, "I bet this would work so well on the outside." And I was like, "What do you mean by that?" He's like, "Do you know if I told somebody in here that they hurt my feelings, do you know what would happen to me?" And I was like, uh, and I kind of had a moment where I'm like, "Uh-oh, what would happen?" He's like, I get my butt kicked if somebody uh you know, somebody just heard me tell them that, this made me feel this way. I don't like how you said this. Can you use other words? And he was really just talking about how the culture inside this place was different from the culture out there. And while he understood why he had to learn this and why I had to teach this, he said that it wasn't always applicable. And that was such an aha moment to me, that just because something in theory should work within a cultural context, if it doesn't make sense, it's not going to work. It's even if you apply it. And I think that that was something that really needed to be addressed, and I brought it to my supervisor, we talked about it, and, it just really for myself, it really resonated with me. I'm like, "Wow." I really need to be mindful of what I share with my clients. And when I am not really aware of what's happening in someone's community or culture, I need to learn. I need to be a student first before I can give advisement. I think that really what keeps me grounded is being in a position where I can also learn in addition to advising and counseling.
Yeah. Did they change anything about the way that they were giving that class on the heels of that?
To be honest, I think the answer unfortunately is no, because
Yeah.
these are all, like, again, kind of back to the red tape, where that is kind of what is outlined in what the curriculum needs to be.
Yeah.
And that's what was said was going to be done, and that must be done because that was in the contract. And so, that also kind of lends to the inflexibility sometimes. And again, a little bit lobbying back up to the policy issues.
Yeah. Yeah. My grandfather used to go in ministry in prisons, and it's one of the things that he would go and he would have all these conversations, and every now and then he would have something where he was like, "I had never thought about it this way, and I'm gonna change the way that I speak on this moving forward." But ministry is different from mental health, right? Like, you can change what you say on a dime in ministry situations. It's much harder to do whenever you're giving an actual program like anger management and that kind. Well, I mean, it's good that you recognize and took that into, your own consciousness at least a little bit.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
So, what does culturally responsive care actually look like in a therapy session?
That's a really good question. And I think that uh, we'll say that everybody has an opportunity to take their own interpretation of how to practice culturally responsive care. But one of the things, again, in addition to, if we haven't done our homework, if we're not really aware of something, it is taking the time to learn. So
Mm.
not just, when our clients, we learn from them, but it takes that extra step to say, what do I need to know about this? What do I need to know about this value of this system, of this culture, of this client? And doing your homework to say that if I am going to be giving advisement and counsel, does it fit? Does it work? And really being reflective about what tools are in your own toolbox that you're going to be using. What is appropriate for the situation? And if we are not there and we don't know, seek advisement. We seek help. We seek supervision. We seek counsel with our own, within our own community. And that I think is really important and really great is that there are a lot of counselors in network that we talk with each other and say, hey, I'm working with a client in this community or of this culture, and I really am unsure of what to do. So we seek help. We do the things that we're asking our clients to do, which is lean on your resources, learn, grow, change. And so I think that to me, when it really comes down to a boiling point, there are a lot of things that we can do in regards to opening it up, but really a big part of it is just being open to learning. And I think that for some people that may be um, a challenge at first because you want to feel like you're the authority in the room. But I don't really feel like your therapist needs to be the authority in the room because you are the authority on you. And most good therapists understand that. And then they'll recognize that you're the authority on yourself. And therefore they need to also be in a place of being a student and learning.
Is it hard to ask for like further input of folks who are in the mental health space? Is it hard to kind of be like, "Hey, I need help," or do you have a pretty good community around you in your practice?
So I will say that I'm very fortunate. I do have a great network of providers that I know that I lean on. That came from, a career that I've had in mental health. And I've had such a broad career that has given me access to some of these really wonderful people. But there's something about being in private practice care. You're operating in a silo in a lot of ways because it's just you if you're in a solo practice and you may not have access to colleagues and coworkers in the same way if you worked in a health center or in a large organization. So being intentional about having community is really important. I think just in, community in general is really important, but especially in this line of work
Yeah.
because it's unrealistic to assume we'll be the experts in everything and everyone.
Do you think it's good to tell your client like, "Hey, I'm gonna get some further input on this and come back to you," or do you just generally at the end of the session kind of like go get input and come back and just move on from there? How do you handle that usually?
Yeah, I think that it's very important to be honest with your client and not, we're not trying to just kind of fluff them around and say, let me try to kick this can until I can get more information.
Yeah.
I think that letting your client know, hey, this is where my, line of understanding is. This is something that I want to know more about and learn about. So I will circle back to this with you. I want to learn more about this. I'm going to get some advisement and counsel because this is important for me to talk with you about. So please let me do that and I'll circle back. And I think that it can also help clients to understand where you are, where they are, where the line is. And our clients who I think need a certain level of understanding coming into that. And if your client understands where your line is, it may help inform their decision of this is care that is going to work well with what I need, or maybe I need to consider other options. And it's about transparency and about what we bring to the table. And I think that that is important also in regards to cultural responsive work, is letting our clients know, hey, if this fit works, it's because you understand everything that comes with me. And if you need certain things, I can share with you what I do have, what I don't have.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up kind of the fit of everything. First of all, it's perfect segue into my next question. But second of all, we talk a lot on this show, especially about if your therapist isn't working for some reason, get a new one. Like, go try someone else. We're all humans. Sometimes our personalities aren't going to get along well, and that's going to impact care. Sometimes it's just a matter of you don't want to hear what they're saying, and that's okay too. Like, go get a second opinion. It's fine to do that. But what are some signs that a therapist isn't a good cultural fit specifically, and how can a client speak up about that?
Absolutely. That is a really important thing. And I think that the onus really should be on the therapist to recognize that. But unfortunately, sometimes it isn't. But I think that when a therapist, if we're in a session and your therapist is maybe making commentary on maybe more definitive things about what should or shouldn't happen in regards to, so here's a classic one. Like, let's say if you're 18 or 19 years old, you're a legal adult, but you live in let's say like in a multi-generational Southeast Asian household, let's say like Filipino, for example, and you are sharing with your therapist about how you still have to listen to your mom and dad, and they're giving you these curfews, and it's frustrating because you're trying to work and study, but you want to socialize. And if your therapist is like, well, you need to just stand up to them, you need to make these definitive boundaries. It it really is kind of orienting from more of an Occidental, a Western philosophy about how familial systems work. And family systems look very different in different cultures. And filial piety is important, understanding the community, understanding what it means to be a part of that greater whole without really understanding it. And if you don't know it, you could be advising someone to make a choice or a decision that really is going to impact not just their relationship with their family, but it could just really shake up a lot of different things and really can change. Now, for some people, they may want to break out of certain cultural norms, and that's not a bad thing. If they want to deviate from that and they want to work with their therapist on that, that's one thing. But if a therapist is really kind of leading you in a direction that isn't in line with your values of your culture of yourself, and you're trying to shift that, or if you feel that you have a hard time, if you can't speak up about it, I think that just really to me might be your sign. Because
Yeah.
if the therapist is leading you in a place and you don't feel like you can move down that direction, it may not be a good fit. But if you can, and you are able to say something and feel comfortable, really helping your therapist understand, hey, this is kind of where I am. And it sounds like we're going a little bit here, but I'm a little bit over here. And I think that is not an easy conversation. That's why I think the onus really should be on the therapist a little bit more about recognizing and, discerning about what, should or shouldn't necessarily be maybe brought into the session immediately. But when, I think that I usually use therapists the analogy I use is a shoe. You want the right shoe for the right occasion. You want the right fit. Some people, they're tough and they could run a marathon in stilettos, but not everyone wants to. They might want to put on some nice, comfortable walking shoes or running shoes. And, you got to try them on though. You got to find the right fit, the right size, and that can take time. And it's okay to do that. It's okay to just shop around to find the fit that works for you.
Yeah. And I know I brought it up before, but I'll just bring up like my first experience with a therapist was really awful. It's not that she was a bad therapist, but she was a bad therapist for me. And I thought that's how all therapy was. And I'm here to tell you, if you're in a therapy session and you're like, God, this is awful. This is terrible. I don't understand how this works for anyone. Just try another therapist. It took me years to go back. And I wish I had gone back with a different therapist way sooner. Because it wasn't the therapy was bad. It just was not the therapist for me. So just try someone different. And it's okay. It's okay for it for you to have a bad fit with someone. It's fine. Just see if you can find another one, if possible. You
Absolutely.
supervise clinicians and you teach counseling students. What is the most important mindset shift you try to instill in new therapists?
That's a really good one. I think with new therapists is wanting to come in and being a superhero. I kind of frame this for them that recognizing that our role is a specific role, it can feel limited compared to what they're envisioning, and that we don't go in and kick down the door and solve every problems. We invite the client to share. We invite what is happening in their lives. It's not on us to just be like, okay, tell me what's going on. All right, we do this, this, and this. We're going to do this, this, and this. It really is about building the therapeutic alliance. Research has shown that there is such an importance in the congruency of relationship between yourself and your counselor. Because when you have a good relationship, when you trust this person, when you feel connected, that is when the direction, the change, all of this is more likely to happen because you feel that this is someone that you can trust. And so, as we said earlier, there's a theory you could just say, well, if you made this, this, and this, in theory, it could change and it might, but it's not easy to just do that. So I think a lot of new therapists come in with this idea that it's got to come in, I got to make these changes immediately. I'm coming in, it's superhero time. Let's get it all done. But it really is about slowing down and allowing the client to come into the room and to be able to sit there and let it kind of simmer. And it doesn't need to just take off at a rocket pace.
And you don't want to be trying to do the work for 5 clients in a day, right? Like, you want to let them
Yeah.
all do their own work. You're not going to want to, it would be too much to take on everyone's problems all at once. So yeah, that's a big one. What's
Definitely.
something that gives you hope about the future of mental health care?
I do see positive change in a system level. I mean, you'll hear this politically all the time where people will say we need more mental health care. But if you watch, is that following suit? Are people doing things to support mental health care? And there are places, the answer is yes, but there's some places where it's not. But what I do see is that at least at state level, in some places, we are seeing change being made more accessible, whether it is with opportunity for therapy, whether it is just increasing, what is happening for the therapist in training. So for us in the state of Hawaii, we just opened up a provisional license, which is a really big thing for us because that means that once you graduate, you're eligible to start practicing with a provisional license, which is giving you the theory. And this is where it's a little gray because there's no commitment by the insurance panels to credential you or to get you with the insurance. But in theory, you're now eligible to bill for insurance. And why that's important is because as we talked back on these marginalized communities where they don't really have the same money to be paying out of pocket, but if they can use their insurance to fund their therapy, then that's great. And so now we are bringing in more people into the community. We're bringing more providers in at an earlier and faster rate, which is going to help to offset the need because there's a disparity of clinicians in the field right now. So it gives me hope that we are finding ways to bring in more people, to encourage them, to support them. And that, is my greatest hope is that we are moving forward.
Sometimes it does feel like a couple steps backwards. And I think we're in that pendulum swing the wrong way, but that's my opinion. So it is time for our magic moment. If you could wave a magic wand and eliminate one common opinion or theory or misconception about mental health, disabilities, mental illness, what would it be?
Wonderful. And that's an easy one. It is that mental health equals or therapy equals being crazy, essentially,
Mm,
is that people, I think the common misconception, and people people know about this and talk about it, but there is this kind of almost knee-jerk reaction where if you're in therapy, there's something wrong with you. And so if I could wave a wand, it would be that going to therapy doesn't mean that something is wrong with you. People connect psychosis, crazy, all these really buzzwords around therapy, but it isn't. If you're sick and you go to the doctor because something's wrong, a lot of people are like, okay. If you go to a therapist because something isn't right, you need some advisement, you need some counseling, you need some support from a professional, that could be destigmatized. I think that we would see so much growth as a community, as a society. That would be something I wish I could wave a magic wand around.
yeah. I'll take it one step further and just say I wish it would be treated like the dentist, except unlike me, I wish people wouldn't ignore the dentist because I ignore the dentist hardcore. But I think everyone should go in for a mental health check, and I think it should be covered by your insurance at least once or twice a year to go in for a mental health check, just like a wellness check at your doctor, just like a checkup at your dentist. I think that it would be a good thing. And then if you need to extend some sessions after that, okay, you got some shit to work through. Okay, great. You go for the next, 5 sessions, whatever it is you need to help you work through something in your head. It doesn't even have to be like, oh, I'm experiencing depression. Oh, I'm experiencing anxiety. It's just like, oh, I have something in my life that I could use a sounding board for. Therapy is great for that. So yeah, I love that. I think that's fantastic. Well, Gino, thank you so much for being here with us. I'm going to post your socials one more time. And while I do that, if there's anything you want to say, anything we didn't get to talk on, I'll just give you the floor for a minute while I post your socials for folks to be able to connect with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Everybody, thank you for listening, for giving me the chance to speak with you, to talk about some of these important things. We are in the process of redeveloping our social media platform. We're going to try to get more content out. Our goal is to try to provide some educational tools via our social media. We're going to have information on our website, but with the Instagram and TikTok and other things that we're going to try our best to put this out there. We just feel that there's a lot of information, that can be supplementary. But I always encourage you folks, again, therapy is a great place to go for some support. It is something that really, if you don't do it, I really encourage you to try it, even if it is not something that you feel may be, what you need to do right now. Just getting a taste of what it might feel like might help you recognize that, wow, this could be really beneficial, because it's not always about fixing one problem. It can just be about starting the maintenance phase, or just jumping in and seeing, learning about yourself. So I just always want to encourage that.
Absolutely. Well, folks who are here, thank you so much for being here with us and for engaging tonight. And Gino, again, thank you so much just for taking out the time. I'm going to disconnect with Gino and I will be right back. I'm going to give you guys a puzzle to work on while I disconnect. And also Tyrion is here, so you'll get to see him too. But give me just a minute. And Gino, again, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
That was Gino and I talking about what it really takes to make mental health care accessible to everyone. I keep coming back to what he said about that anger management class in prison. He was trying to teach these guys to use their words and express their feelings. And one of them pulled him aside after and said, "Look, that might work on the outside, but in here, if I told someone they hurt my feelings, I'd get my ass kicked." And Gino had this moment of, oh, right. Context matters. Culture matters. What works in theory doesn't always work in practice in everyday situations. That stuck with me because I think we do that a lot. We take advice or strategies or frameworks and we assume they should work for everyone. We forget that people are living in completely different realities. What makes sense for me or for someone else in one situation might be useless or even harmful for someone in another. If you've ever been to therapy and felt like your therapist just didn't get it, you are not alone. If you've ever tried to access care and hit wall after wall, that's not your fault. The system is broken in a lot of ways. It wasn't designed with everyone in mind, and we are still trying to fix that. But here's what you can do. If therapy isn't working for you, try a different therapist. I know that's easier said than done. I know it takes time and energy and effort and sometimes money you don't have. But if you can, keep trying. The right fit exists. It might just take some searching. If you're in a position to advocate for better access to care, do it. Show up at town halls, contact your representatives, support organizations that are fighting for policy changes, vote for people who actually fund mental health services and not just talk about them. And if you know someone who's struggling to get help, believe them. Don't tell them to just try harder or that it's not that difficult. It is that difficult for a lot of people. Listen to what they're dealing with, and if you can help them navigate the system, do that. One more thing Gino said that I loved. Going to therapy doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It just means you're getting support from a professional. We go to the doctor for checkups. We go to the dentist, even though I personally avoid that like the plague. We should be able to go to therapy the same way, just to check in, just to talk through something, just to have a neutral person help us process our lives. I really hope that one day we get there, where mental health care is as normal and accessible as any other kind of care, where you don't have to be in crisis to justify getting help, where the barriers that keep people out right now just don't exist anymore. If you want to connect with Gino, you can find him on Instagram, LinkedIn. I have a link in the show notes that will take you to his website. Go give him a follow. Check out what he's doing. Support the work. And if you found this episode helpful, please leave a review or a comment wherever you listen to podcasts. Save it and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. We do Mental Health Monday every week live on YouTube and Twitch. and we cover everything from therapy to disability rights to just surviving the chaos of being human. Thanks for being here, thanks for listening, and remember, even tacos fall apart sometimes, but that doesn't mean they're not still worth eating.